Hello and welcome back to another episode of Red Tinted Glasses, and it is another victory to speak about on the episode as the Dons continue their fine form. Just one defeat in 9 now as we head really into the business end of the season. A Shayden Morris solo goal giving the Dons a 1-0 victory over Ross County. Myself and Phil will look back, maybe have to fill in some of Phil's memory from that weekend's win over Ross County. Talk transfers, because there's been some movement on that front. So we'll be questioning why Callum's not here for that part. And of course, preview the big game this Sunday as the Dons host Rangers at Pittodrie in the lunchtime kickoff. So Phil, lots to get our teeth stuck into this week.
Yeah, a fair bit to cover. Starting in sunny Dingwall, where the mix of the sun and the beer probably not great for the internal workings of my body, but another fun trip up north with the fourth red slot and ES and Jando as well in tow.
Yes, I know. Shame that Jando wasn't behind the pitch with filming duties. Been get to enjoy the game from the stands. One change on the podcast this week: Callum drops out. Nobody comes in. It was just one change to the Dons team at the weekend. Jeppe Ockels, I guess after the praise he got for his performance, maybe surprising to some to see him drop to the bench. But Shayden Morris coming in, and we definitely saw the benefits this weekend.
Yeah, again, I said it last week, and I'll say it again. Probably why we're on here and not in the dugout. Morris proving Jimmy right for getting him in from the start, and it's good to see him having that instant impact. A lot of that's kind of been questioned up to this point in the season about how effective he can be as a starter. So if he can put in performances like that, if he's getting another string of games under his belt into the split, then all the better.
Yeah, I guess, obviously both of us didn't catch the St Johnstone game, which was one of the last games he started in the league, and there was, from what we both saw, I guess, online, some question marks around the impact that he brings. And I remember Tyrone Smith speaking to Jimmy Tillene at the end of the game on Sports Sound saying, does this maybe answer the question that Shayden Morris is saying, that, he can deliver from the start? I guess when we speak about other players as well, you need to just see that sort of consistency throughout, don't you?
Yeah, absolutely. And, it was, again, another good performance from Palaversa and Clarkson in the team from the start. Shinnie as well at left back, not really doing too much of note, but obviously as well not doing too much wrong either. So it's good to see the players that have maybe had their impact questioned throughout the season, sort of stepping up to the plate a little bit, a vital time in the season.
Yeah, and of course, team spirit kind of really shining throughout the whole team. Obviously, as I said in my piece for the BBC, Shayden Morris is going to grab a lot of the headlines, but the defence deserve a lot of praise as well, which we'll come on to in a little bit as well. But I felt overall in the first half we were very much in control of the game, without probably creating too much, which was maybe a frustration certainly watching at home. I don't know about those well tanked up in Dingwall, and I have to say the backing that was coming from the fans there was tremendous throughout. At the weekend, really came through loud and clear on the Red TV coverage. But yeah, I just thought that even when we were discussing about what to speak about in the episode, there was not a lot of talking points from the game itself.
Yeah, I mean, especially that first half. I think I'd put something of similar vein up at half time. Sort of saying other than Morris's goal, there wasn't really too much of note. County having a chance from a set piece, which I think everybody expected to come at some point in the game, and quite a comfortable save for doing in goals. But yeah, it's a strange one because I was on a quick look over the stats just before we came live, and although it kind of felt like we were really in control, I found it quite interesting to notice that in the game as a whole, apparently County had 53% possession, which felt a bit strange. It felt like they weren't really in our half all that much. It was maybe a case of possession with nothing happening with it. But yeah, you're right to mention the crowd as well. I'd mentioned that to Scott McLennan, who was sort of saying how good the crowd was. And I think you hit the nail on the head where that connection between the fans and the players was really evident throughout the full 90. And it was, one of the better away ends that have been in this season, that's for sure.
Yeah, and I'm sure that kind of really spurred the players on and probably kept them motivated. Not that they should need that, but you know what I mean, in that sort of sense, in the second half, when I wouldn't even say the going got tough, but I never again, you know, in the second half, even trying to rack my brain on chances created, the only one that really sticks out for me was Obde Dabag, who should have probably shot with his left foot just before stoppage time. And, you know, thankfully when Ross County go up the other end of the pitch, it doesn't come back to haunt us. But yeah, I don't really remember kind of too many clear-cut opportunities. Again, I don't want to feel like it's going to be the Pape show every week, but again, it's another performance that probably needs looked at, because I guess kind of there was question marks around whether or not he would start, or obviously Esther Sokler and Obdi Dabag pushing for that spot to support Kevin Nisbet. Steve Tosh, as colourful as ever on his commentary. I know Callum picked out a couple of the choice words he had, but also picking up on Pape's performance, saying that he's a handful because even he doesn't know what he's doing at times. One moment you'll get a bit of brilliance, which we saw in glimpses, and the next he's passing the ball straight out of play again, which we saw at the weekend. Being up there, what did you make of his performance?
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting one. Pape fills a weird role where he is quite versatile in how he can sort of be used, whether he is used as a ball carrier or as a bit more of a target to hit. I felt like he was getting used as a bit more of a target, which I don't really think was working for him. Again, having a quick look at the stats, he only won 5 out of 10 of his aerial duels and apparently lost the most duels in the game, losing 12 of them across the ground in the air. So felt like that part of his game wasn't sticking. But like you say, he's like that. It's the enigmatic nature of him where in a split second he can, pull a little pirouette out and he seems to just have acres of space and take a midfield out of a game. So it was a weird one. It was oddly frustrating in the way of I feel like he wasn't quite doing what he was set out to do, yet still somehow getting a result here and there. It was odd, but I do feel like we maybe looked like we had a little bit better there when we had Sockler and Dabag on to kind of fill that role a little bit.
Yeah, I thought we looked a bit more cohesive in the front three when those players, as you mentioned, were on. But again, I guess it goes back to that kind of you don't know what he's doing role. I remember Skipper posting on Twitter that's probably one of the reasons why Jimmy Talene puts him in there, because he occupies defenders and he allows space for others to free in. I guess the only frustration is when things kind of don't come off for him. But again, if we go back to last week's episode, I remember Callum highlighting Noah Chilvers as a key player for Ross County. That was probably a big loss for them going into the game this weekend. Stephen McPhee also kind of mentioning that they were missing a couple of their starting left backs, so possibly a nod as to why Jimmy Talene looked at Shayden Morris as well. And Sculpture kind of summarising the game as a whole, solid win, always tough for us there. And I think, given we spoke about the pitch, we spoke about they aren't, normally easy games up there. Any sort of win, given the fact that, the result at Ibrox came through in the manner that it did, we've just got to take that and we move on to Sunday's game to see if we can do similar to what Hibs did.
Yeah, and I think that's exactly it. It's the fact that we've not lost any ground, albeit it's frustrating that we've not gained any by the fact that Hibs were able to get that result at Ibrox, and obviously Dundee United picking up a win as well at Hearts. The fact of being able to keep it as is really good, because, like I say, this season it feels like when we're in those situations, we seem to slip up so much, especially going away to County. That adds even more of a banana skin to it. But I thought our overall play was quite good, and I think what impressed me most, as you say, with the state of the pitch, was how quickly we were getting balls into the box, and especially second balls, because I thought County did quite a good job at sort of stopping the first ball. Although perhaps a second string left back, I think it was the boy Campbell that was in, I thought did quite a good job at narrowing the space. But I think the speed we got the ball into the box caused issues, And really, like I say, although County maybe, according to the stats, as much as I didn't feel it,
Yeah.
had the most of the ball, it felt like we were able to keep them camped in their own box, which, you're always going to create chances and have opportunities to win games if you are able to play like that.
Yeah, absolutely. A few people commenting on players that didn't get minutes this weekend. Can't be bothered saying no minutes for Nicky Devlin again. Wonder if we'll see him on the park for us again. We'll come on to probably the biggest role Nicky Devlin's had in recent weeks shortly. John Kilo also asking if Jamie McGrath's going to play again. I think that's a straight no to that one. Whether or not that shoulder, quite ironic that when we mentioned Jamie McGrath, you started rubbing that collarbone area. I wasn't sure if that was a sly dig or not. But yeah, I don't think we'll see Jamie McGrath play for us again unless there's some sort of catastrophic illness that sweeps through the squad.
Yeah, I can't see it myself, and especially with the fact that it is so tight between us and Hibs right now. There'd be nothing worse than him conveniently skying a penalty over the bar for his new employers to get Europe. But there, that would I think have the walls of Pittodrie getting ripped down by the fans.
Yeah. Well, one person whose future does still remain undecided going into next season is Ross Doohan. Again, I go back to the comment that you made a few weeks ago about the size, seeing him in the team lineup. As I mentioned, I think he deserves just as much praise as Shayden Morris from this weekend because, again, hearing you say that stat possession feels really strange because I didn't think Ross County dominated the ball in that manner. But for all that they offered, which was really little, it just shows how much Ross, kept his concentration levels there because he really does come up clutch in the 90th minute there with a quick double save to deny Ross County, what in my opinion would have been undeserved equaliser and really been a kick in the stones for our third place hopes.
Yeah, I think up to that point, majority of the chances County had were quite comfortable. I did think it was one of his more assured performances. And I don't know if that was just down to the fact that County weren't really producing much in the final third. But yeah, like you say, that double save at the end, I'm pretty sure I had my back turned just after the second one because I just felt like it was going to, hit off the post and go in. But yeah, I've got to eat my words and say that yeah, there'll be no size from me if Ross can keep comfortable performances like that coming.
Well, I guess the question's posed because there's not been a confirmed return date for Dimitar Mitov. I believe the injury is not as bad as first feared, and he still retains hopes of returning for that upcoming semi-final against Hearts at Hampden. We also got the game this weekend. If we take the game this weekend aside and say Dimitar Mitov is fit for the game at Hampden against Hearts, right now, who are you starting in goals?
See, it's a tough one because, like I said, I think Mitov's been a brilliant keeper. Aside from the fact that he's just picked up so many injuries, but previous experience, for example, the game at Tannadice where it felt like he was somewhat rushed back. Is the match sharpness going to be there come Hampden? You're not too sure. So I think it is a risk. Obviously, you want to play your best team possible, which in my opinion is Mitov in goals. But again, you're in this awkward position with Ross where he's not really done anything where you could go, oh yeah, he should definitely be dropped because he's been awful. He's really not had that moment. And it's a tough one because, like I say, I think you don't want Mitov to be rushed back and then him out for the split, basically, is what I'm getting at, because it's the exact same thing that happened last time and it kind of scuppered us for a hot minute there. But yeah, I'll say Mitov for a definitive answer for you, Glenn. I'll say I want Mitov, but I don't think it will be.
I guess the way you could look at it is if he comes back, gets us to a Scottish Cup final, and then gets injured, I would take winning the Scottish Cup over finishing third. But I think most of us would do that as well. the really kind of question I was trying to get to, though, was based on recent performances and I guess what we've seen from Ross this season, does he deserve a contract extension? Both himself and Tom Ritchie out of contract in the summer. So that's two backup goalkeepers, two Scottish goalkeepers, of course, which would be important for the homegrown quota for European football as well. Do we stick with Ross or move him on and stick with the youth and the youngster and Tom Ritchie?
Yeah, I mean, it's a tough one because obviously Tom's not really had too much experience in in as a starting goalkeeper in the squad.
Mhm.
And I think that might be the area that holds him back a little bit. With Ross, you're getting someone who on this season alone has been, tried and tested and proved that he can step up when needed. As much as I'm quite a big proponent for having those pathways in for the younger players, I think at the moment, if the money's right and he's happy to play number two, I'd be happy to extend Ross's contract. Similarly,
Mhm.
having another Scottish body in the team and Tom Ritchie, should we get Europe this season, is an added bonus. But again, I think it all comes down to financials and also, the player's career progression as well. If
Yeah.
Tom wants to go somewhere where he thinks, he's going to have more chances, perhaps in the Championship, then all power to him. I mean, look at the likes of Ethan Ross, who looks like he's on his way back up with Falkirk. So definitely wouldn't be opposed to keeping both, to be honest.
Yeah, and I guess Joe Anderson also speaking about Vito's getting a new contract earlier in the season. In his opinion, does that seem like bad news for Tom Ritchie? And I think, obviously he's had experience, Bonnie Rigg, Bucky. I know obviously Bucky's not been up into the SPFL, but he played in the squad against Celtic. So, he's had decent first team experience as well. So maybe he does want to go out there and get minutes. But I agree, maybe Ross, as much as a keeper wants to be playing every week, is quite happy, pushing Dimitar Mitov all the way. So interesting. It could, I guess, come down to wages and potential opportunities. That's the problem with being a goalkeeper. You can only play one. So, yeah, we'll see what comes from that. Final piece from the weekend's game before we move on to other contract news as well. I guess we have to speak about the ending to the game as well. We always see the customary, what's it, match winning or post-match selfie. But once again, Ross County and their army of stewards who seem to ruin the fun of football tried to get in the way, but fair play to Nicky Devlin and the rest of the squad who had Shayden's back and posed for a very lovely squad photo in front of the goals. And again, as you mentioned, they're kind of strengthened the connection between the away support and support in general and the squad as well. I think it was really good to see the togetherness of the squad coming together. Although, as you highlighted, it looked like Obde Dabag was ready to deck the steward, and Esther Sokler had no idea what was going on and was just dancing about on his own.
Yeah, I mean, the Highlander John Henderson did his best. I mean, I think that was the only steward that was actually interested. And like you say, as soon as I saw Dabag running up to him, I thought, oh no. So yeah, thank God we had Nicky Devlin on hand to de-escalate the situation. But yeah, like I said, it felt like there wasn't even a single body that left from behind that goal.
Mm.
And as you say, this sort of adversity in commas of not being able to take the selfie, I think just kind of riled everybody up a little bit more. Everybody got a little bit louder, at the expense of the steward for the most part. But also, the plaudits towards Shayden as well, who got a rousing chorus as he sort of came up towards the north stand. So, yeah, I don't quite know why the steward had such a bee in his bonnet about it, but hey ho.
Yeah, exactly. And as we've already mentioned it, and Dave McLaren highlighting the travelling support as well. Another sellout up in Dingwall as well. Let's not go on to speak about the next game that's not a Pittodrie yet, because that is just getting extremely tedious speaking about ticket sales for that game right now. So what I do want to speak about is sticking with the squad, as Paul Donaldson highlights. Good to see Jack Milne signing a new contract, the young centre-back, signing a contract extension that will see him with the squad until the summer of 2029. And as Jack said, once he spoke to the manager and, felt encouraged that he was part of his plans, had no hesitation in signing a new deal. Pretty impressive as well from a player that started out in the centre of midfield, worked with Neil Simpson, and Neil Simpson encouraged him to move back into defence as the academy saw him best utilised for first team opportunities if he moved back to defence, and now reaping the rewards of that.
Yeah, absolutely. I thought what was interesting to me was the use of at least 2029, and there was no mention of the option of an additional year in the club's sort of press release. But I feel like there must be something there, because I don't think I've ever noticed that before when it's came to a contract announcement. But yeah, pleased for Jack. It's a player that I felt sorry for when he got his injury, because I felt like he'd started stepping in a good string of games and really started to find his feet a little bit at right back. I think no one was really too sure on where his role might have been within the squad. I feel like centre half was just kind of thrusted upon him because he's a giant. But I feel like at right back he looked really composed, and again, having grown up as a midfielder, had really good with the ball at his feet, reads the game so well, and I think there's an opportunity for him to be, for the time being, at least a pretty big role player within that squad.
Yeah, and I guess if you look at the fact, obviously Alfie Dorrington currently on loan, the talk around Gav Malloy out injured just now, but when he first signed was a project in inverted commas signing. So he'll be looking at that centre back, position to see if he can tie that down for himself. I guess the question potentially looking towards next season, we've seen Alexander Jensen excel on that right-hand side. The left-hand side of our defence, certainly left wing-back, is open for debate. Going for a whole season, I guess you could call Graham Shinney makeshift there between now and the end of the season, but I'd be a bit disappointed, I guess, if we moved Alex Jensen over to left wing back for a season when he's looked so comfortable on the right, and I think the right is known to be his preferred position.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, as we mentioned earlier about the lack of Devlin's minutes, it'd be interesting to see the role that he sort of takes up. Should he still be at the club next season, which, I hope he is. But you almost feel like he's maybe too good of a player to be playing second fiddle. But, and again, if that is the way it's going to pan out, you'd think that maybe also limits Jack's chances ever so slightly. If he is just relying on opportunities coming at centre half. So I think it'll be interesting to see what role he fills. I'm hoping it's not just a case of tying him down for a European spot, because I do think he's a better player than just being there to make up the numbers.
Yeah.
Please, he's got a new deal nonetheless.
Yeah, and those that might have seen the club's Red TV content with him when he had to choose one or the other, what did you make of his comments that he would rather win the World Cup with Scotland than win the Champions League with Aberdeen?
It was a bit, read the room a little bit. You're doing your interview for your club. Even if that's not what you're thinking, at least just appease the rest of us. But I suppose at least, Aberdeen's got European trophies in the cabinet. Scotland has bought the Kirkin Cup. So, if you can be on the squad that wins the first World Cup, I suppose you'll be remembered a little bit longer, perhaps.
Yeah, I mean, if we can get out the group stages at a major tournament, that would be progress. And then I think, a few people also picking up on the fact that is Russell Anderson or Andy Considine question, maybe just showing his age as well. Although I think had Callum been here, he would be in agreement with Jack. But I'm definitely picking Russell out with the two of them.
Yeah, I mean, we were having this discussion in our group chat earlier. He was 11 when Anderson was in his second spell at Aberdeen. He's gone through the entirety of his youth career with Constantine probably being his mentor and role model. So unsurprising, I think, to say the least, that Andy was picked there.
Folk will be like, if he's his role model, hopefully he's better than him. No, actually, that's no offense, Andy, because I know he said he'd come on this podcast. That was a joke. Please take it that way. Sticking on recruitment side of things, there's been some talk, not obviously officially announced yet, that there is going to be a new scout joining the ranks. We'll see how long this one lasts. I think it's more specific. I could be wrong on that, to the Scandinavian market. It is former Tottenham left back and Swedish international Eric Edman. If it is more dedicated to the Scandi market, I guess it makes sense and just shows the investment that we're putting into Jimmy Tillene.
Yeah, I think it was Aberlytics. I think I saw tweet about him being a sort of regional scout for Scandinavia.
Yeah, quite enjoyed that Theo Tenkat then piped up and said that he was available if we wanted one for the Dutch market as well.
Yeah, more the merrier. As long as he has like a definitive answer for Rowies over Stroopwafel, then he can have the gig in my book. But
and not Skittles.
Not Skittles, no, that different thing. But yeah, I think it's unsurprising that we're looking at tap more in that Scandinavian market. I feel like it's one that's the club has obviously highlighted as having a lot of potential. It's a market that Jimmy knows as well. And hopefully an area where we can unearth, more Bojan, for example, where we can pick up players on the cheap and, either have a world beater on our hands or sell them on for a good profit in line with our transfer model.
Yeah, exactly. And, it's, I think, long been spoken about a market that we should be looking at kind of exploring before we had Jimmy Tillene as our manager. So certainly something I'm not opposed to. We've seen it when we came up against Haken in previous, that some of the players, not necessarily Scandinavian, but that are playing there, the quality that they possess. Another kind of interesting thing in that sense, that if we are looking at kind of different scouting markets to back the manager, as I mentioned, it plays into the investment, unless you're like me and are investing in stocks and shares right now. This investment in Jimmy Tillene looks a lot safer bet because Donald Trump can't affect that. But Keith gave me a good fact that it's the first time in 4 years we've reached this stage of the season with the same manager that started the season. And given kind of the fan pressure that was kind of coming in around December and January, people questioning the project and that it just shows, I guess, Hibs fans will tell you the exact same. Stick with it and things will come good eventually.
Yeah, and I think, like we said, this sort of flurry into to exploring the Scandinavian market more, buying into sort of what Jimmy's needs are for the club. I think are a sign that he is getting back in as well. Obviously, there was that recent appointment to the board a few months ago, who previously worked, I believe, on Right to Dream, which is basically football academy in Africa, who actually a lot of their exports go off to play in the Scandinavian market. So a little bit of tie in there, and again, signs that it is a case of building for the future, and hopefully Jimmy's going to be part of that long-term plan, and I think really should be from what we've seen.
Yeah, and good to see that we're investing in other areas, because we're not seeing any benefit from that tie-up with Atlanta's Can't Be Bothered rightly highlights as well.
There's still time for Ronald Hernandez to turn good and have his homecoming. I've got faith.
Yeah, well, he seems to be coming good in the MLS now, that's for sure. Who's the other boy? John Gallagher. God, remember him? He seems to be hitting it off in the MLS as well. But yeah, it was good for a pre-season trip, or was that mid-winter trip?
Mid-season, I believe.
Yeah, that was definitely something. Right, where does the weekend results leave us in the race for third? As I said, obviously we took care of our own business. I was going to say there was a surprise result at Ibrox, but really, if you were looking at form, there was no real surprise in that result. But are Hibs favourites? Or I think I was listening to the BBC Scotland podcast, and the Hibs fan said they feel it's going to come down to that post-split fixture between ourselves. And then obviously that game's set to be at Pittodrie as well. So that's a real big one coming up.
Yeah, I mean, I think when you just look at just now, I mean, the run that Hibs has been on, to give them credit, has been unbelievable, and fair play to David Gray as well, for showing a little bit of strength, sticking to his guns, and getting Hibs to where they are. But I think it's exactly what I view it. I think it will come down to the split fixture between us and Hibs. Like I say, thankfully it should be at Pittodrie, which might swing it a little bit in our favour. But I think it'll be an interesting end to the season regardless. Because I mean, there's still a toss up for the top six as well. There's a chance that Hearts still might not be in the top six, which
That would be hilarious.
Which would be very, very funny. But I'm also just not too sure who I prefer. I have too much PTSD of St Mirren games to decide whether I want them in over Hearts. But yeah, I think it'll be nail biting for those European spots. And I think that's kind of what you're wanting as well as a spectator. And I think it's probably what the league's wanting as well, is to have that last gasp drama. But yeah, I think at the moment I'm 50-50 on whether we can edge out Hibs yet or not.
Yeah, no, it's interesting though for you to pick up that Hearts making or not making the top six. Obviously, it's a must-win game for them at the weekend, and the only reason I'm bringing this up is because yet again, in a so-called big game in inverted commas, as I'm sure that the Hearts fans viewed their game against Dundee United with at the weekend, because had they won that, they would have secured the top six. The SPFL could have got the fixtures out. No, sorry, that we know that wouldn't have happened. But yet again, Neil Critchley has failed to win a big game. So if Hearts stumble this weekend in any kind of sort of sense, or literally stumble over the line into the top six, if St Mirren fail to beat Ross County, the pressure then kind of turns on them, looking ahead briefly to the game at hand. And because I think someone put up at the weekend that he's only beat won one of his games against the current top six teams. So yeah, interesting, that little perspective, looking ahead to a couple of weeks' time.
Yeah, I mean, it's always a double-edged sword. If Hearts fail to, capture the top six this week, they can basically just throw hammer and tong at the semi-final.
Well, you say that. I mean, they're only 5 points off the playoff spot. So,
well, true, but I think if they could get one over us whilst being outside the top six and make a final, I think that would probably appease the fans for at least a little bit, and buy the board a little bit more time. But also as well, if they get beat the weekend, it can go one of two ways: either dejects them, Critchley's under pressure and he crumbles, or it kind of galvanizes them a little bit to prove a point. And it's similar to how I'm looking at the Rangers game that obviously we'll come on and discuss with them playing midweek. It can go one or two ways of how they react to it.
Yeah, and that kind of does take us nicely on to the game at the weekend, because it is a big game at Pittodrie, obviously, for both teams, in the sense of ourselves looking to keep our hopes of finishing third alive. Obviously, we'll know how many points we are behind Hibs going into the game, potentially behind Dundee United as well, of course, by playing the Sunday. But also Rangers themselves will know that they may have to defeat us, or the league title is officially one and done for Celtic, providing that they see off Kilmarnock. The match officials were announced for this weekend's fixtures as well. Stephen McLean will take charge, and Andrew Dallas is on VAR. Put the tinfoil hats on for 30 seconds to appease everybody here, Phil. It does feel like the SFA are doing everything they can to help Rangers after that result of the weekend.
Yeah, I mean, they won't be wanting the title challenge done just yet. I think they'll be hoping and praying that it can be won or lost on Old Firm Day during the split, and will be their dream.
Do that though. That was what was annoying me as well, because had Celtic defeated St Johnstone, I think that the title would have been done before we even kicked off next Sunday, potentially. Celtic would have only needed a point at home. So you could have almost, and if Hearts had actually got their shit together as well, you could have pretty much had the top 6 fixtures organised, but of course they won't allow for the league title to be officially won on an Old Firm day or make it Flag Day. So yet again, the fixture list is being dictated by 2 teams, unfortunately.
Yeah, which again, it's just a flaw of our league, that's always going to be there as long as they're there.
It's a flaw of 2 teams and their fans being idiots, but there we go.
Well, exactly. But yeah, I think again, like I say, Rangers won't want the title race to be done just yet. And again, like I say, it could go one or two ways off the back of their European fixture as well. But yeah, you feel like it's all in line to be an absolute barnstormer again.
It is. It's just a shame. It's kind of, I don't know, the gloss is off it a little bit with a Sunday lunchtime, but I'm sure the fans will do a terrific job of getting themselves up for it, and the atmosphere, as you mentioned, will still be absolutely cracking. But you did make a good point as well. How does Thursday potentially affect how Rangers come here? We'll look at the Aberdeen point of view in a second, but since you've already made that point, I kind of want to touch on it because, as I said, if they're coming to Pataudry still in that tie against Bilbao and the league effectively being over as well, Barry Ferguson spoke after the weekend's defeat to Hibs saying he will be making changes for Thursday night because players aren't showing that they're good enough, which is hilarious because Connor Barron started that game. But again, if you're still within a chance of making it to a European semi-final, does he make changes coming to Pataudry, knowing that that's their only hope of silverware for this season?
Yeah, well, that's what I was going to come and say. I think it all depends on how Thursday night goes. If they're still in it, or heaven forbid, which I hope isn't the case, they're somehow, going to Spain with a lead. You'd think they would throw it towards Europe. Like you say, they've got really, as much as they're not out of the title race yet, there's really nothing left to play for domestically. They're probably, they're not going to get caught in second. They're not going to win the league. They might as well just go for it in Europe. But I'm hoping that whatever happens on Thursday, it's massively leg sapping with a lot of key injuries. So that they come here very depleted. But yeah, it'll be interesting, I think, to see, like you said, I think it'll be interesting to see how he changes the team for Thursday and then how that then has the knock on for our game.
And I think as well, it's interesting because it potentially knocks confidence of players that are, thinking they're doing a good job and dropped because the manager's been so vocal as to why he's making changes. So it potentially unsettles them in that sense. Again, given their result at the weekend more specifically, because obviously doing this live on Tuesday night, we can't predict what's going to happen on Thursday. As we said, I hope for everybody else's sake in Scottish football that they are not going back to the Basque region with a lead. But how does Jimmy Tillene, prepare for this game with looking at the game at Ibrox in mind that, has just occurred, the success that Hibs had, but, potentially not being sure what kind of lineup he's got to face?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the first annoying thing that Jimmy will have is that their away form's been their saving grace. They've been absolutely abysmal at Ibrox, but they seem to somehow pull it out the bag, even being 2 or 3 goals down whilst away from home, which I think is a little bit frustrating for him. But I think it's important that they take the game at Rangers and they take it to them quickly. I don't let them get into that rhythm of playing. They're a side that, even like I say, away from home are still shipping goals. So there's going to be chances, and I think it's important to be clinical. We saw it at Parkhead where we just failed to be clinical at the chances that came up, and I think we have to really rectify that at home to Rangers. And where Hibs got a lot of success was hitting the likes of Martin Boyle in behind with his pace. And will Shayden get 2 starts in a row? I'm not too sure.
I think he's got to.
He has to off the back of it, but
I mean, even look at their last away game at Dens Park. Scott Tiffany was having so much success in behind Simon Murray. I mean, I know there's talks for him getting a Scotland call-up, but again, clinical, but he's got a bit of pace about him as well. So I would actually argue for going for Esther Sokler, which obviously we saw the last time Rangers came up here, because he has pace and directness to burn in there. I don't think Kevin Nisbet's necessarily blessed with the most pace, but I would trust Sokler to be more disruptive than Pape if we're looking up top.
Yeah, and I think as well, I think this is one of the games where I think Pape could really have a good impact off the bench when we've sort of been able to react to how the game's going and actually put him in for a purpose that's going to suit that game, as you know, as opposed to, like I say, at County, putting him in from the start to kind of be a bit more of a target man where he wasn't really needed in that role. You know, if you do maybe bring him on for maybe even Morris, if he starts to tire on the hour mark, if he gets the nod, put him on in the wing, and give him that opportunity to run at fullback. So it'll be interesting. Like you say, I think much like you say about Pape, the sort of the unknown nature. I think the Rangers team that shows up on Sunday might be a bit of that unknown nature, depending on how many changes are rung for Thursday night.
Yeah, and I think that comment about Pape on the wing's actually quite fair as well, because again, he does have pace to burn, and we've spoken about Shayden being that kind of unexpected quantity coming off the bench with the pace, but also but Ockles could offer something off the bench as well. And again, we finally got depth. Certainly strength is still up for debate, I'm sure, by a few coming off the bench, but it's good options that we're back to having, not maybe one or two that we're like not sure how that's going to pan out as well. I think the midfield battle, again, it feels like something we always highlight in these sort of games, but Joe Anderson absolutely right to highlight that Clarkson and Palaversa both need to be staying in that team to find the passes. But again, those two players need to, it'll be interesting to see if they're afforded as much time on the ball as they had last time we played at Pittodrie, or if I haven't seen anything to suggest Nielsen's going to be back fit. So I'm assuming we're just going to continue as is with those two. But yeah, if they can have the opportunity to dictate the midfield and our kind of style of play, tempo is the word I'm looking for, that could be key for us getting the right result. And I think we have to take the sort of same template from the victory that we had last time Rangers visited Pittodrie.
Yeah, and I mean, I think they're most likely not going to get the same amount of time as they've had of late, but I think they're the two players that you would probably rely on being able to pick out those quick little one-touch passes around the corner and keeping the ball moving. And I think that's the real important thing about that midfield, is when you're playing in front of a crowd that's going to no doubt be very, very loud, very boisterous, you know, to keep that energy going by keeping the ball moving quickly and keeping the ball moving forward, more importantly, to try and get Rangers on the back foot, I think is really key to hopefully having a bit of success on Sunday.
Any concerns about Clarkson in the midfield? Skoksker saying he's maybe too lightweight for that midfield battle. I know he's tried to kind of step up to the plate a little bit in recent weeks, but any concerns around that?
Not too much, and I think that's purely because I can see Shinnie starting again at left back, and I feel like that's where Shinnie's kind of looked his best there, as effectively being an extra body in the midfield at times. But I do think Clarkson has kind of worked on his game a little bit, in terms of not being too powder puff. You know, he's been back to sort of throwing himself into challenges a little bit more. And again, I just think he's been on a good run just now, and I think the quality he can produce kind of outweighs the sort of negative nature, perhaps, of his defensive side of things.
Yeah, I guess you could maybe drop him back into that kind of sitting midfield role just in front of the defence if need be as well. Speaking on the defence, if Christers Tobers is fit, does he come back in? That was a question posed by Can't Be Bothered.
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting one. You know, Canisters has been a revelation since he's came in. In Dorrington, the odd scuffed pass aside, it's kind of stepped up to the plate a lot recently as well. So, and again, it's similar to Meatov. You're not wanting to rush him back. and then risk having them out for the split as well. But we're in this weird position now where we seem to actually have a slightly settled backline. It's been the same for the past few games. And do you want to disrupt that, particularly against a team that potentially is going to ring the changes, and you're not really too sure what you're coming up against as is? It's trying to strike that balance.
Yeah, and I think again for me this weekend, I think the balance that we've seen, you're absolutely spot on with that defense. They've also built the partnership, built the confidence off the clean sheet. Last week, hopefully, Knoosters is actually okay after that tumble at Ross County as well. But I think just don't change that element. For me, I could only see the one change, and that is whether or not Pape starts. Folk will probably argue the two changes, and it's whether or not Shayden starts. But I think with what we've seen, and you've highlighted with Martin Boyle for Hibs, I think you've got to be starting that quick player, because there is gaps in that Rangers backline to take full advantage of, and to take advantage, you need your best players on the pitch. Given also Rangers' ability to find themselves 2 goals down in pretty much every game under Barry Ferguson as well, do you think we do take that same approach from that last time they came here and look to really go at Rangers from the first whistle?
Yeah, I think absolutely. I mean, for years, like I say, Tavernier's even came out and said it himself in the past, where Rangers really struggle when teams are in their face.
Yeah.
And I think that's what you've got to do. I don't think they've got enough quality there where they'd be able to easily play through our press at every opportunity. And that is part of Jimmy's style, is you risk that happening. But I think we've been quite steady at the back and dealing with teams that are trying to do that. So I'd say, like I say, quick start and take the game to them is the best way to go about it.
Yeah, and then given how poor Rangers have been, and as I said as well, mentioning the fact that they seem to find themselves 2 goals down regularly under Barry Ferguson, you're right to point out their away form has kind of been a bit of their saving grace. But again, we saw Kilmarnock and Dundee probably shouldn't have found themselves losing the games that they did against them. Confidence should be high for this, or actually, maybe I'll rephrase that. Is there an expectation, do you think? Because I know in our group chat we have an expectation that we should be coming away with 3 points this weekend.
Yeah, expectation, maybe not the right word. I think a belief, perhaps, to tame it down a little bit. But
So I
like
was
you
filling
say,
the Callum optimistic role here.
like I say, I think it's probably a better time than ever to have this fixture as the sort of last pre-split fixture, where I think we could take something from it. We're a team that's in form, Rangers off the back of a league loss and then a potential tricky European fixture as well. I'm wanting to say we're looking good for hopefully bringing a game to them. But yeah, like I say, it's just all about concentrating for the full 90. And I think that's the key thing. Like you've mentioned, the Kilmarnock and Dundee games, where there is that sort of last few minutes where there's that switch off and collapse. I think it is important, especially if it pans out like last time, where we do find ourselves in the ascendancy, that we don't let any silly mistakes creep in, or give them any sort of opportunity to latch onto anything.
Yeah, I think you did well to rein yourself in there from getting just a little bit ahead of yourself. But I think it'd be a real statement from ourselves as well to respond to the victory that Hibs got at Ibrox as well, but also a real statement going into the final 5 fixtures of the league season and the game, of course, at Hampden in the Scottish Cup semi-final. If Hibs do defeat Dundee at the weekend, that we're still just that 1 point behind them. Of course, we can't seem to fully shake Dundee United off yet as well. So again, just naturally the way fans of opposition teams will look at this weekend, they'll be looking at it expecting Aberdeen to drop points. So I think if we can buck that trend, but I certainly feel that we should kind of have the confidence. And just looking at some of the comments coming in, John Kilo saying the expectation, yes, Aberdeen should be winning every game. Paul Donaldson says there's no reason why we can't win on Sunday, but we'll have to play as well as we did against Motherwell, if not better. And Graham Gibb saying prediction, whatever happens on Thursday, the real Rangers will turn up on Sunday. To translate as well, Rangers will raise their game because that's always what happens. But I think it'll be a good game. I'm confident there. I've said it. Watch that come back to bite me in the butt. But there's no reason not to be, based on what we've seen in recent weeks from Aberdeen, but also in recent weeks from Rangers as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I say, I think bit of positivity, a loud crowd, and a big 3 points before the split. And yeah, we'll have another nice episode to come back to.
Yeah, and then we can set ourselves nicely up for that trip to Hampden, which we'll be previewing in full on next week's show, along with, of course, the review of the weekend's game against Rangers. So thank you very much to everybody that has tuned in here with us live on the YouTube channel. As ever, remember to leave a like on the video, subscribe if you're new, and follow us on your audio platform of choice so you never miss an episode. Until next time, we will see you then.